Hello, and welcome back to Magnetic Masculinity Podcast, where we provide men with practical tools and strategies to bridge the gap between achievement and fulfillment so that they can live their most magnetic lives. Today, we continue going through Magnetic Masculinity Blueprint, but in relationships, and we're talking a bit more on authentic alignment in relationships. And for anybody listening who don't know what we're talking about or want to dive a bit deeper into authentic alignment, feel free to go back to episode 14 because that's when we were going really deep into authentic alignment specifically. And today we're going to talk about importance of aligning one's needs, boundaries, and values for a healthy relationship, importance of awareness and parts work, and then we're going to go into areas of authentic alignment within relationships that are sexual, parenting, baseline needs, financial, emotional, leisure, and professional. So maybe we can start with refreshing people's memory on what is authentic alignment and how does it fit in relationships specifically.
Okay, great. This is going to be a really fun episode, and we're going to try to pack a lot of value in. So stay tuned. So authentic alignment, again, is that concept of who we truly are, what truly lights us up, rather than our self-concept or our conditioned self or that conditioned masculinity. And just a quick review, love and belonging is the number one biological, neurological, scientifically inarguable need of the human species. Unfortunately, because we're in the emotional dark ages, we confuse fitting in with love and belonging. And because we are an interdependent species, in childhood, we sort of throw away parts of ourselves that we think get us disapproval. So for men, if they have like a really soft, sensitive side or something that would get disapproval, they'd be like, whoop, they lock that part away in their subconscious. And we create this, here's who I am. The example I often use is, say you're a man who grew up a little boy in a rural community that was a ranching community, and everybody went quadding and hunting and fishing, and those things are great. But say you were born being really interested in ballet and reading philosophy, and you really liked to be, you were sort of quiet and you wanted to study music and all these things. But in order to fit in with your family, if your dad was like, hey, don't be a sissy, what are you sitting around reading for? Let's go hunting or something like that, you would suppress your authentic desires and needs and prioritize fitting in with the person who you needed approval from to survive. So then they might become like, yes, I am a rancher. I go quadding and camping, and I don't like any of that sissy stuff. But really, your authentic self is like, I really love those things. So it's who we are rather than who we became in order to fit in and feel good enough. Because again, we're confusing fitting in with love and belonging. We also create a lot of blind spots. So all those parts of us that don't fit our self-concept that we won't look at, that sometimes impact other people. And then, or another example of this is, say you grew up in a family of lawyers, and it was just expected that you were a young Jewish boy from a long line of lawyers. You were going to marry a Jewish woman, become a lawyer, go to Harvard like your father did. I have a client like that. But really deep down, maybe you didn't like any of those things. Maybe your authentic nature is to be more free and travel and become a writer, or, but you were taught you had to be a stay-at-home family man who goes to the office every day and be a lawyer. But maybe being a family man wasn't even really truly what you wanted or what your soul desired. Or maybe you had a big family to make your partner happy, but really you value a lot of independence and freedom and travel. And so it's sort of sorting out which parts of you are authentic and which parts of you are coping mechanisms, because this impacts us in our everyday life with our ability to reflect on why we are or are not feeling better, and also what we would choose in a relationship. So I have a client who grew up in a very religious household with lots of siblings, who was taught that they had to get married right away and have lots of children. And he was like, I am a family man. That is what I do. And well, once you have children, you do have to maintain that commitment, but finding other ways for his soul to express itself, which might not actually be in the same way that he grew up thinking he had to be in order to fit in again. Because again, we're confusing, sorry, we are confusing fitting in with love and belonging.
Can you talk a bit more on what does authentic alignment look like in the context of relationships?
Well, when we kind of know what makes us tick and what we authentically like, it's a lot easier and more authentic and aligned to find relationships. For instance, I chose never to have children. I love children. I've written blog posts about it for anybody who's interested in why I made that conscious choice. So I would have had to sacrifice my core desires and what I truly wanted if I was to get in a relationship and have a bunch of children to please my partner. And if my partner authentically, that was in alignment for them, they would not be it would not be fair of me to have them sacrifice what they want to fit in with how I see things. My previous partner traveled a lot for work, a lot. And we were both very independent and enjoyed autonomy. I love spending time with myself. It's like really great. Now, if he had been in a relationship with a woman whose core value and need and desire was for big family and community and connection more of the time, he would have had to sacrifice his authentic desire for exploration and freedom and autonomy and introversion, or she would not have had her core need met. Again, like we talked about yesterday, it's hiring an accountant, putting them in a sales role when what you needed was an HR director. So just, kind of knowing who you are and what makes you tick. For instance, I like a lot of physical touch. So if I had a partner who does not prefer physical touch, one of us would have to constantly be sacrificing. And I was in a relationship like that once. And I was like, I really thrive with a lot of physical touch. It calms my neurodivergent nervous system. And it's just something I really enjoy. It's I like all the love languages. I like all of them. I want an abundance of everything. So to be in a relationship with somebody that didn't prefer that, again, would mean that we were mutually incompatible to meet each other's needs. And, or I love growth. Like what I do for a living, I apply in my own life. I love it. If I had a partner who just kind of wanted to stay the same and be average, which there's nothing wrong with that. But that for me, when I've been in relationships like that, is excruciating and smothering. And for them, feels like they're never good enough, never good enough. Because I'm like, hey, here's something that sucks. Let's fix it. Let's eat better. Let's do better. Let's try this. Let's experiment with that. Let's try 5 days of silence and no electronics. Let's do this. Let's do that. Whereas for the wrong person, that would be really awful. But again, when we meet each other, it's normalized in society that we try to impress the other person and we become inauthentic, right? Most of humanity right now has not been celebrated for authenticity and individuality. We've been celebrated for fitting in. So again, we're at this big paradigm shift in humanity as we evolve out of the emotional dark ages, where we're starting to try to find the divinity in that diversity. And instead of trying to be what we think the other person needs us to be in order to gain their approval, it's more like we talked about yesterday or last week. Here's what flavor of the buffet I am. Is that a flavor that is delicious for you? Great. And if not, that's okay, because there's a billion flavors of the buffet to try. We're all here meant to be different. We are unique, one of a kind, limited edition expressions of source consciousness having a human experience. So we're not meant to fit in. There's not meant to be redundancies. We're meant to find what our superpowers, what our calling, what our genius zone, what lights us up, and then honoring those wants, needs, boundaries, and values. And then getting into a relationship is equally honoring and seeking clarity and sort of studying what our partner wants. What are their wants, needs, boundaries, and values? But again, if we're going into a relationship with this coping strategy or this conditioning, here's who I am as a man. I like this, I like this, I like this, I like this. Oh, no, 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 no. I don't want this or this, because we've been taught that that's bad or wrong, or it was something that we were, shamed for in childhood. It's just harder, not impossible, but it's maybe suboptimal to the strategy of just being like, here's who I am. Here's the good, the bad, the ugly. I'm confident in my imperfection. Here's what I'm working on and willing to work on. Here's what I'm not working on. What do you like? What do you prefer? What are your goals? What are your values? What do all these different areas of life look like to you? And is there a way that both of us can get our needs met, live in alignment with our values together without having to do a lot of compromise, which means you don't get what you want and I don't get what I want. I don't love compromise. I think maybe occasionally it's like, okay, is it that important to you what color our countertops are? Okay, I don't actually care that much, so you pick this one. So there can sometimes be one of those, but I prefer to find win-wins rather than compromise. Because a lot of compromising is often a sign of incompatibility. You bought a duck when what you needed was a horse.
You mentioned studying your partner's wants, needs, boundaries, and values. What are some good ways or practical ways how men can approach this? And with that, also with how to deal with some maybe wants, needs, boundaries, and values that the other person has that might be hard to accept, or it might not feel like it's alignment with you and who you are. How can men navigate that as well?
That's a lot of questions. Okay, that's a good one. You keep me on my toes. So the first part of your question is, how do we study our partner? Well, when I'm working with clients, I have sort of workbooks that I have them work through and certain exercises that I give them where we can start a process of self-inquiry and curiosity. But something I often remind couples is that you are never done studying your partner. You can be endlessly curious. So it's constantly being curious, not assuming, not thinking, oh, I know what they're going to say. I know what they think. But and when they are behaving in any certain way, it's not like, why are you angry about this? Or why do you feel that way? It's, why are you angry about this? Why do you feel that way? It's more of this constant curiosity and acceptance. Just, we want to be accepted with all of our messy bits. That's often why we are inauthentic, right? It's because we think, well, this part of me is too needy, or this part of me is too cocky, or this part of me is not this enough, or that nobody's going to like this part of me. Or, oh, if somebody really knew, a lot of my high performing executive clients confess these things to me where they're like, if people knew who I really was, they wouldn't love me, or they wouldn't accept me, or they wouldn't promote me to CEO, or whatever it is. But imagine a world where all the bits of you, all of your parts, if we refer back to our parts work episode, imagine a world where all of those parts get a seat at the table, and where you are accepted when you're angry, when you're sad, and you think, when I'm angry, or I'm upset, or I'm sad, or I'm struggling, or I feel shut down, what would I want from my partner? Do you want them to go, well, there you go, getting angry again? Or why are you angry? Is it my fault? Or would you want somebody to sit with you and be like, I love you. If you're angry, it means something impacts me too, because you are a part of me. Not in an unhealthy codependent kind of way. Everything is a spectrum, but we're talking in the healthy swing of that pendulum. So it's more this like constant curiosity, compassion. And I also give people like protocols to work through when they are frustrated or triggered, and how to process their emotions, and sort of approach relationships from a more multidimensional model as we evolve our understandings of how human beings work. So yes, does that answer your question?
I have a follow-up question here. Like, what are the things that can get in a way of that curiosity?
Shame. Because as soon as we're triggered, as soon as we feel like our software our software from childhood of like, I'm not good enough, or nobody appreciates me, or nobody understands me, whatever all of our programs are that are running. And when we feel that shame, that sting of not good enough, or feeling judged, or feeling disapproved of, or anything, what happens again is our parts kind of do a hostile takeover. And all of a sudden, we're not speaking heart to heart, we're speaking part to part, defender personality against defender personality. And then we just get caught up in the dance of context and content, instead of dealing with ourselves at the emotional level first. We have to connect before we correct. And we all have wounds, and whatever might trigger our, there is not a more divine, delicious, amazing, painful, messy place to find your deepest, darkest wounds, your furthest shadows, than in the container of your most sacred, vulnerable relationship. And it's when we care so much what our partner thinks, and their opinion matters so much to us, and that connection is so important to us, yet we're living in the emotional dark ages, that they are the ones that will typically be the catalyst for most of our opportunities for expansion and hitting our deepest core wounds. So if we create that healthy container where we can work through those things together as a team, and again, constantly be curious and help each other figure out, like, is this really, a part of you, or is this, an unmet need? And we can start to be curious about ourselves and our partner, and it can become this super delicious, amazing, safe, connected way to heal and grow together, so that you spend less of that time in the parts to parts dance and more of the time in the heart to heart, by being curious. But you are going to get it wrong sometimes. Your shame, your fear, your wounds, your misunderstandings, because we're always applying layers of meaning to other people's behavior that it may or may not mean. So there's certain tools, like, again, revisiting, some of them are so simple, but not easy, especially when we're triggered, which is like asking ourselves, am I using my words as medicine or poison? And remembering that one sentence can change somebody's life for the better, or trigger 10 years of pain, shame, precipitating thoughts. So we want to be very mindful with our words to our partner, because instead of that being our most sacred, divine, trusting relationship, that's where our little shadows and our unintegrated, inauthentic parts come out and tend to feel safest to bring up all the stuff that we're not really willing to look at, the shit sandwiches. So instead of being like, oh, I've got this part that's just like my father, where I want to make other people feel small, or whatever it is, we're like, I don't do that, because it doesn't fit our self-concept, and we'd be ashamed of that part. So then we project it onto our partner. We either avoid it, deny it, deflect it, project it back to them. I don't do that, you do that. I'm not dishonest, you're dishonest. Or we're like, I'm not dishonest, how could you say that about me? Or whatever it's just, yeah, our closest relationships are the ones where we really get to do the deepest work.
And with the clash, or having the partner have different wants, needs, boundaries, and values, can you talk a bit more on this? Because I feel like this will be valuable for men to keep in mind as we go more into those areas of authentic alignment and navigating those.
Yeah. So again, it's never that our partner is responsible for meeting all of our needs, wants, desires. It's more, hey, how do we together find a win-win? So say your partner wants a lot of close connection and presence, which we all need and want, by the way. But you really decompress by working on your car or golfing or something. It could look like, hey, in order to be the best husband and father that I can be, I need a few hours to regroup. And then could we do this connection exercise, or could we just go and talk, or whatever their favorite thing is. But being accountable that you're not just going out, getting wasted, coming home too exhausted to presence your family, and then bitching at your wife for being upset about it, or you know what I mean? Like there is definitely a layer of accountability there of like this genuine, at some point at the beginning, you might have to, I don't like the word fake it. It might feel unfamiliar at the beginning, but eventually just constantly giving to somebody else what you would want in return. You know, my husband likes to work out a lot in the gym. He likes to meditate, and I want him to do those things because that's when he's happiest and healthiest and feels good. So I want those things for him. I also like to do some independent activities, but also for me, I like deep presence and connection and communication. And so we make sure that there is time allocated for all of our needs to be met.
And
And there's an accountability factor in that. And there's just a genuine, I want him to win. And I want me to win. But what that sometimes looks like is we want everybody else to win, whatever that looks like, without acknowledging our needs. That's what I used to do. I used to be a self-sacrificer. And then I swung the pendulum the other way where I was like, I'm not meeting anybody's needs. I am all on my own. I don't need or want anybody in my life. I'm not letting anybody in. So I've experienced all the different sort of pendulum swings and all of those different behavioral strategies.
that was my follow-up question about how can men manage their authentic alignment, one's needs, boundaries, and values, and the other person's as well, especially approaching it from perspective that they treat their partner's one's needs, boundaries as important as their own.
Yeah. And that's a very unfamiliar thing, which again could be on the shadow, on the unhelpful side of it. That would be codependence, self-sacrifice, being open to what they say, and trusting that if your partner is starting to act like a bit of a jerk, or they're getting angry and frustrated and naggy and bitchy or whatever it is, that is a really clear KPI that there is some unmet needs. So the worse your behavior or your partner's behavior gets, is the stronger the KPI that something is out of alignment. And we bring things out of alignment or back into alignment through connection, communication, and curiosity. And again, wanting that mutual win, that win-win. How do you win and I win?
And now going into the areas where men can find or look to find alignment with their partner. Let's start with emotional. So how can men navigate and find what does it look like, emotional alignment within a relationship, and what could be some of the ways to get at least closer to that alignment?
Well, first, doing some of the emotional work independently is very helpful. Getting comfortable with those emotions, like I talked about in a lot of episodes, referring back to, is getting really familiar and comfortable with your own emotions. Because what often happens, because men are so, which is not their fault, but it is their problem, they are so unfamiliar and uncomfortable with emotions, they become unfamiliar and uncomfortable with their partner's emotions. So they're constantly trying to do things to manage their partner having an emotional reaction, which can seem loving, but it's more of an avoidance energy than an acceptance energy. And if we refer back to last week's episode, some of our emotional needs are love and belonging. So we want to feel appreciated, acknowledged, accepted, and even admired. And people are like, oh, I don't need to be admired. We would all love that a little bit. And we are all beautiful, and we are all gorgeous, and we are all special, and we are all have amazing qualities. And who doesn't want to just be adored and admired by their partner in a healthy way when it's mutual? So it's not just somebody projecting their greatness onto the other person, because we can get caught up in these projections in relationships. It's very normal, but just sort of that mutual, again, those mutual core emotional needs that everybody has: acceptance, appreciation. You know, people want to feel seen, heard, accepted, understood, and some of those core needs. And over time, we want to spend more time completely accepting however our partner is. Like, imagine if you're in a bad mood or you're angry. And I don't know, in some households in childhood, anger is one that's like very hard to deal with for humanity. So if you're feeling angry or upset about something and your partner's like, you're angry and upset, you're bad, it's going to increase the shame and the disconnection from the part of us that's angry, that's trying to inform us of something. Or we're going to blame others for our anger and make play emotional hot potato, or try to take it out on others. So we want to find healthy ways to be like, hey, public service announcement, I feel like breaking shit today. I'm in a pissy mood. It's not your fault. And have your partner be like, great, I love you when you're angry. It's okay. You don't take it out on them. You don't blame them for your anger. And if you are in the middle of a reactivity moment, which is totally normal and natural when you're a human being, is probably not the time to discuss content or context. You probably just wait until later. Or I have like anger protocols or sadness protocols, things that I help people walk through that are like, when you're feeling angry, like imagine if you could feel angry in front of your partner and just be accepted and be like, let's go get a plastic baseball bat. Are you angry? Great. Let's go get a plastic baseball bat. I love you when you're angry. I accept you always. I have boundaries, so I don't accept you taking that behavior out on me or blaming me for it. But I love you when you're angry. I love you when you're sad. I love you. Imagine in childhood how we wanted to be accepted no matter what we're feeling. But a lot of times in childhood, it's like, oh, you're angry, go to your room until you're feeling better or something. And then we start to, again, become inauthentic, or we try to manage our emotions and the emotions of others. And we miss out on that navigation system teaching us something really important about our life that could be very helpful in our ever evolving expansion.
So I have a follow-up question here about maybe how men could, especially if, let's say, it might not have been as normal in their current relationship to talk emotions or express emotions, and maybe, or they are just not used to that. How can they deal with that maybe vulnerability initially that comes with even communicating about their emotions, that can be really uncomfortable or unfamiliar place to be?
Well, first, I would invite them to consider that this can be the case for women as well. So women are not exactly encouraged to be angry. If we're angry, we're bitches. If we have strong boundaries, I don't know, whatever, there's so women are not emotionally perfect either. And I would say it depends on the emotional intelligence level of your partner at that time, whether you have a safe place to explore that with them, or whether it's healthier to do that with a coach or a therapist, or on your own, or in some sort of a group environment. You kind of want to build that muscle up a little bit build that foundation before you take it into your most vulnerable relationship, where it's going to be harder. Like, your relationship is like your grad school of vulnerability and emotional expression and emotional acceptance. And again, it's hard for me to answer that question without understanding a little more about their relationship dynamic right now, because it might not be a safe environment it might not be at that time a safe environment for you to open up emotionally, especially when women are very used to, again, I'm very generalizing here. I would like to acknowledge that I'm grossly pushing stereotypes a little bit, but women in general might be used to, in general, men behaving a certain way around emotions. So they might be defensive, or I've experienced this, where when men do speak their truth, I wouldn't be able to hold it and I would fall apart, and then they would have to comfort my emotions because I'd be like, and I wouldn't actually sit there and sometimes be like, hey, right now it's my time to hold you. And again, we've talked about this before, where it's like, men are like, okay, now you have to be strong. Wait, now be vulnerable. Now be emotional. Oh, wait, don't cry. Be strong. I need you to be strong so that I need you to be safe so that I can feel safe, or, and all these confusing ways that we put men in this constantly, this game where the rule set's constantly changing, but we didn't give them a playbook or a rule book on how the game works. So it might be that you have a relationship where you can really work on these things together. And it might be better for some men to practice this in a different, really safe, secure, securely attached environment. Like some clients, if I create that secure attachment with them, they can practice some of those skills on me, understanding that then the goal is for them to go out and not be just attached to me, but to be able to go out and apply those skills with their family, with their children, with their wife, with their husband, whoever is important in their life.
So now moving into speaking on vulnerability, the sexual area. There's
Great. I love
probably
talking about sex.
another level of vulnerability that comes to communicating the one's needs, boundaries, and values when it comes to sexual part of relationships. So how can men even like start doing that or even understand that and then communicate that with their partner?
Well, first of all, I would like to point out one of the humorous paradox of the human male-female dynamic. And that is that for sacred sexuality, men often need sex to feel connected, and women need to feel connected to have sex. So it can be this really confusing dynamic if they're not both aware of it, because as soon as men feel rejected, because sometimes they don't know how to get those deeper emotional needs met. So sometimes the only way that they can feel close, that's the only thing accessible to them. That's the only thing that they were taught was an okay way to feel close and connected to somebody was through sex. And that might be the only way that they feel accepted and loved and also helping their brain chemistry and all of those things. But if women don't feel emotionally safe, they can't drop into that sexual connection. So that can become a big barrier to that deeper, sacred, sexual, powerful, divine connection that we can have in a conscious relationship. And sexuality changes over time. Our wants, needs, boundaries, and values change. But again, the primary need in any sexual relationship is safety. And what does that look like? Emotional safety, physical safety. And what that looks like to different people is vastly different. And it's also a place where we want to be constantly checking in and curious and try really hard not to take things personally, because this is where boundaries are a very good place to explore. And sexuality is also a place where there can be a lot of inauthenticity that comes up, or a lot of opportunity for authentic alignment, because sex is something that's very, the narrative around sexuality is very sort of controlled or contrived, depending on the country, the religion, your gender. Women are supposed to be sexy, but not too sexy or they're slutty. Men are supposed to be able to perform and they have to have a big, you know what, or else they're, small man syndrome, or like there's so much sexual pressure. And not to mention porn, not that there's anything bad or wrong or shameful with pornography or with masturbation. Again, they're all tools that we can use consciously or unconsciously. But the narrative of what sexuality looks like in pornography is very different than what would actually be authentically aligned for most human beings, including men. So then it becomes part of that software, that programming that we want to revisit and look at, is this actually what I want and what's going to deeply fulfill me? Or is this just what I've been programmed to think is the best thing? A lot of religions, again, I'm not pro or anti any religion. I'm not pro or anti any perspective. I'm just an observer of information. I try to be neutral. I try to be aware of my own biases. And I think that all religions have a lot of benefits. And I think that every person has a lot of positive things. And I think every religion and every person has things that could use a little upgrading, myself included. But a lot of them, when we're taught that sex is bad or wrong or shameful, or that men are predators or whatever, again, we become inauthentic, because we take those authentic desires and wants and needs of the human species and we banish them to the subconscious, because we're like, oh no, I can't do that because that's bad or wrong or shameful or dirty, or I'm a predator or blah, 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 whatever. And if we don't give those authentic parts a seat at the table of our consciousness, like I talked about before, if we don't give that board member a seat at the table and give them a chance to hold the talking stick, what's going to happen is they're going to do a hostile takeover from the subconscious and start being cranky or angry or disconnected or seeking infidelity or becoming emotionally shut down or whatever. We talked before last week and in other episodes about needs must be met. You either meet them directly, you shut down and become frustrated and miserable, or you manipulate to get them met. And most people say, well, I don't manipulate. Well, yeah, because that's your self-concept, right? That's our, oh, I don't want to be manipulative. People are always manipulating. It's just whether we're doing it very consciously, lovingly, looking for a win-win. We're always trying to influence and impact each other. Oh, I'm going to buy you this thing so that you don't get angry. I'm going to do this so that you like me more. I'm going to wear this. So, we're constantly manipulating the narrative a little bit. So it's more looking at, if we want to be really self-aware, it's in what ways might I be doing those things? Instead of saying, I don't do those things, looking in what ways might I be doing those things? And, having a conversation with our partner, this would be an authentic alignment thing. If you have a very high sex drive and you have a super lot of energy and you have no shame and no trauma around sex, and you maybe like polyamory and you want to marry somebody that you've fallen in love with who's like just less interested in sex, who's like, yeah, I could do with like twice a month would be fine. And again, that could be a misalignment for them. That could be a conditioning because they've had a bad experience or trauma, or they feel unworthy or whatever. But it could also be that is their authentic preference. So again, don't buy a minivan if what you want is a Porsche, because a lot of us get in relationships where we're like, oh, this thing is so different, but I want you to change and be what I want you to be to prove you love me. And that's not loving to our partner either, right? Making somebody else or expecting somebody else to do something that is not in their boundary to prove they love us or to make us happy is not the most loving to them. It's like, I want you to suffer a little bit so that I can feel better. That's not, if they suffer, we suffer, right? They're a part of us. So it's really, again, always looking for those win-wins and just finding what alignment is. And I've worked a lot with men who have had infidelity experiences. I have experienced being cheated on, and I've also experienced cheating myself. So I have a very calm perspective from both lenses of what those are a KPI of in our relationship. And it's once I sit down with a couple and I'm like, hey, what do you actually want? Like, what do you need? What was this affair giving you? Like, what are healthy ways we can meet those needs? It's usually quite simple. And sometimes it's so easy. And the other partner will say, oh, really? I like that. Oh, I really love that. That sounds really great to me. But it's something that people are uncomfortable being vulnerable and really openly talking about, or because it's such a deeply emotional subject and there's so much self-worth tied to sexuality, both for men, women, and anybody on any gender spectrum, it can be harder to have those conversations without becoming triggered or reactive and then saying things to our partner that might be a little more like poison than medicine, or taking what the other person says, making it mean something, hurting our own feelings, and then blaming them. I've definitely done that and definitely had that done to me.
So, question here would be, with these conversations, the question is twofold. One is for men who might be dating or looking for a relationship or newly in relationship, and then also men who have been in long-term relationship. What is a good time to bring it up, or how to bring it up, and how can they approach that? Because without having that conversation, it probably is really hard to find that alignment.
Yeah. I think getting comfortable with vulnerability and authenticity is a really helpful baseline to go out and seek a relationship. When I was dating, I was always like painfully authentic. I'd be like, I like this. I don't like this. I don't want kids. I love working. I love being around dogs. I like the water. I like this. I love a lot of time. Like I was like, here's my resume. And even then, some men would be like, yeah, I love that. Oh, that's all perfect. And then we'd get into a relationship later and I'd be like, wait, what? What is all this? This is not what we agreed to. And they'd be like, oh, well, I was just trying to impress you or whatever. And I was like, whoa, 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 no, 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 that's false advertising. I was very honest exactly and specifically what was, what I was offering up. So I don't think there's ever a perfect time to discuss those things. Again, I think it depends on the person. It depends on the person you're talking to. And I think we've almost swung the pendulum a little too far the other way, like we often do in humanity. So I guess it's not too far the other way. I guess it's just more helpful to say that's often how we learn, is we take the pendulum from sexual suppression and repression. And then there was a lot of cheating and affairs and the whole Catholic Church thing and all of these things that happen when sex is so dirty and shameful and wrong, and we're not allowed to just meet that need directly. We become manipulative, we become shadowy, we become, unhealthy about it, and everybody shuts down. Then we took the pendulum the other way and we're like, everyone can have sex with everyone all the time. And, that might be authentically aligned for some people, but that can also be a way that we're trying to fit in without necessarily really deeply questioning what our sacred boundaries are. And for some people that might be aligned. And again, it's about self-inquiry, honesty, vulnerability, and just getting comfortable having uncomfortable conversations.
And what could be some ways how men can navigate having sexual needs differences with their partner?
Yes. Well, without having more context of a particular relationship, it's hard for me to answer that with accuracy because I don't want to give information that may not apply to certain people. But what I would say is that let's go back to some of our emotional needs. Safety. So what safety looks like is different to different people depending on their childhood. We all want emotional safety, acceptance, maybe financial safety, physical safety. And it also really depends if their partner has had trauma, sexual trauma in their past or not, and whether that man has had sexual trauma in their past or not. So that's another layer. I wish I could just give you a simple formula, but it's not always that easy because we're very simple and we have a lot of similarities, but we also have our own layers and nuances. And those are things that I would look at if I was working in with a couple. You could hire a sex therapist or a sex coach specifically. It's one area that I work within as a life strategist. I like to cover all areas. But again, looking for those win-wins. And it might take a little bit more of, what does my partner love and want to feel safe and adored and admired and appreciated and accepted? Because if those bank accounts are not full, it's harder to make a withdrawal. But if your partner feels loved and appreciated and acknowledged and accepted and seen and heard and cherished and admired, you're not going to have any problems having a conversation about sex, because you're not going to be having a conversation about sex. You're going to be too busy having it.
So speaking on bank accounts, what could be good ways, or how can men navigate with their partners the financial area, and one's needs boundaries within that as well?
This is a big one. And again, I'd like to acknowledge that sometimes we're gender stereotyping for the sake of metaphorical alignment, and that I can't talk about every single part of humanity in a 1-hour podcast. So I am a little bit oversimplifying stereotypes. But men are often expected to be the provider, and at their core, they want to make their family happy. They want to make their partner happy. And this can put a lot of pressure on what depending what their boundaries are and how each person views money, because money is very attached to our root chakra or our safety, our sense of safety. And again, that's going to depend on how much what your programming in the supercomputer is. So if you grew up in a family that had lots of money, never worried about money, there was always lots of money there, and it was never like a big topic of fear, and it wasn't anybody's self-concept. It was just great. Yeah, money's easy, you know. You're going to have a very different relationship with money than somebody who grew up with, like, sometimes we didn't have enough money to eat, or my father gambled our savings away. Or so again, trying to find those win-wins and really connecting and feeling compassionate about what each person needs to feel safe. Some people are like, I just kind of trust everything's going to work out. And some people are like, I don't feel safe unless I have $750,000 in my checking account. Now, with some of those people, I'm also going to work on their core sense of trusting and safety. But there's nothing wrong with being a saver. There's nothing wrong with those things. It's, again, I'm going to go back to that energy, that energy behind the action that we talked about in a previous episode, which I will do very quickly. 2 people saving money, twin brothers. One of them is saving $100 a month because from a different energy than the other one. One of them saving $100 a month, saying, oh my God, I only have $100 a month to save. Oh, inflation is going to crush me. I'm never going to have enough money to retire. This is so stressful. I can't believe I don't have more money. I work so hard. I never have money. That's a very unsafe energy behind that saving. Another person his twin brother could be saving, like, I have so much money that there's $100 left over. I can't even spend it all every month. And I'm going to put it in this pot of money that constantly grows. And I'm really smart. So I'm going to figure out the best ways to spend this money to help my money grow faster than inflation, and what I should invest in, and what I could create, and what would be fun so that future me has all this money to spend that's fun. And what are other fun ways that I could make money? Because money loves me. So again, it's looking at what each person needs to feel safe and really respecting that. Because a lot of men feel very unsafe around money, or very taken for granted, or like their only role is to bring the money home and then don't talk about anything else. And then they get home from work and it's like, now you have to do this, now you have to do that. And they feel like they're more of like a machine than, which is a different energy than, thank you so much for what you provide for our family. What can I do to make you happy? You know, are you comfortable with what we're spending right now? Are you comfortable with the amount of time that you have to spend at the office? How do you feel about your job? You know, thanks for making dinner tonight. You always make us beautiful meals. Thank you. I always say to my husband, thank you for buying this beautiful organic food so that we can nourish our bodies, so that we can spend, more decades together in perfect health. I appreciate you. Like, look what you've done for our family. Like, I celebrate you, and what you've done for us is so valuable to me, and I mean it. But if it was like he had to do something all day, every day that he completely disliked and had no fun in his life, and he self-sacrificed to provide for me, that would be a very different sort of energy.
I have a interesting question here. So let's say, for an example, if saver and spender were together, and how can they navigate being in alignment with each other's wants, needs, boundaries, and values, while at the same time navigating that maybe the other, or like their partner's patterns or behaviors might actually be triggering them, or what is their authentic alignment?
So we'd want to look at what is it triggering in them. If it's triggering a feeling of unsafety because they have a lot of deep trauma about money and lack in childhood, we want to work on that trauma. We want to heal that. And we also, it might be authentically, so it might be not an authentic alignment for them. It might just be a fear strategy, or like an unconscious program that we would want to revisit in the supercomputer. But it might just be that they authentically love the security of safety and safety of saving. So, and this person loves to spend and is more like, we'll figure it out in the future. So then we would look at the budget of both, and we'd say, okay, so you're going to save $500 a month, is that enough to make you feel safe? And this $500 a month is a priority for this family. And what do you guys plan on spending that on in the future? Like, let's create an agreed upon boundary around what that is, or an alignment about what that is. And can she or he have $300 a month budget to do whatever they want with, that you don't get to say anything about? So if they want to spend $300 on a pair of Nike Air Jordan, I don't even think Nike makes Air Jordans. That's wrong. If they, I don't know. Like, I don't know. And that's what they want to spend that $300 on. Great. So you see how we found a win-win there? So you can go and spend this budget on whatever you want. It can be stupid, frivolous. You can spend it on one bottle of wine, or you can save it up for 6 months and buy yourself a Gucci watch. Whatever you want is perfect. But here's how we find that win-win of what you need and what you need and want. And then again, also looking at that opportunity, if one person is super triggered or activated about it, is it because, again, I would have them go through my trigger protocol where they ask themselves, like, is this a boundary being violated? Is this an old wound being picked at? Is this an invitation for healing? So that they can understand the power behind whatever their emotional navigation system is communicating to them about their software.
So as they were speaking, I thought of asking about this, like, what's the importance of open-mindedness in navigating these areas and finding that alignment in each of them within relationship?
Again, it comes back to that curiosity, which can be trained. It's a skill like anything else. We have some preconditions like awareness, curiosity, compassion, self-compassion, because if we're really hard on ourselves, we're going to be really hard on our partner. And if we're really judgmental of ourselves, we're going to be judgmental of our partner. So it's being accountable, doing your own work autonomously, and prioritizing awareness. So, oh, I am a bit of a cheapskate. Okay. Or, ooh, I am actually very financially irresponsible, and that makes my partner feel unsafe. It's prioritizing information and alignment over protecting our shame and our ego, which can get very uncomfortable, but with time, you'll become very good at it. And that's why, if we go back to our episode where we talk about shit sandwiches, we're actually rewiring the brain. We're changing the neurological software in the supercomputer by celebrating anytime we're like, oh, I was being a selfish jerk. We both celebrate. Wow, I'm so proud of you, right? Because it's like accepting all of those parts. Not now, part of acceptance is accepting that some things need changing. But it's that acceptance, and it's over time rewiring the brain to welcome blind spot or self-awareness opportunities. So if you look at the other areas of life, like leisure activities, family expectations, work-life balance, vacations, all of those things, with that same lens of looking for those win-wins, then your relationship is just going to be so much more fun and fulfilling and exciting, and doing the work and not being perfect. Again, remember, and if you're already in a relationship, it's okay. It doesn't mean you have to end your relationship to work on your own, but it's doing that work alone and doing work together. It's not a one or the other. And again, depending on where your relationship currently is, it might help to build up some of those emotional muscles and really practice some of those tools in a safe place before you bring it into grad school, which is your most sacred relationship.
Yeah, so that's authentic alignment within relationships. And next week, we will be talking more about the vehicle of consciousness within relationships.
Great. I look forward to it. We'll see you then.